All right. My dear fellow listeners, good evening once again, and welcome to another edition of Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat is a Canadian initiative with a global impact. There are a few different ways to listen to us. You can listen to us on the regular dial, that's the radio, 102.7 CKMS FM. You can listen to us on TV as well, for those of you who have the Rogers digital box. And of course, we are live streaming Chit Chat here, so do take the opportunity to share a page. I ask you to stay with us if you would like to learn a thing or two. However, if you're looking for an opportunity to vent out negativity, this is not for you. Tonight, it's a very important night, just like any other night, but tonight's a little bit special because tonight we'll take the opportunity to really get to the bottom as to what it means when it comes to this whole, caste system and all of that, and who is better than Dr. Visham, to explain to us what it means, how it affects us, in our daily lives, in this, in our community in general, all of that. And so, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Visham is from the Caribbean Hindustani community, that is, and he's going to talk more about that. But obviously, we have invited him to really explain to us, and so that we can, have a better sense as to what this whole caste system is all about. Because I mean, it can be extremely confusing, and this is a topic that we don't really talk about too much, and it is extremely important, right? And so, Dr. Visham, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here. I mean, I'm not an expert when it comes to this, but I'm going to take the privilege, of course, before the end of this show here, to give my perspective as well too. So, welcome to the show. Let's Chit Chat with Narine. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, and thanks for the opportunity. I love the topic because it's a topic that a lot of people try to avoid,
That's right.
especially in the Indo-Caribbean community
Mhm.
and even in India. I just like your view as well as at Caribbean Hindustani, which is a organization for promotion of Indian culture and things like these.
Mm.
So your viewers could visit caribbeanhindustani.org as the website, as well as Caribbean Hindustani, the Facebook page. Uh,
Awesome. 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 So, of course, I do have a few specific questions for you. And it is my hope that you will be able to break it down so that by the time we finish with our chit chat here, usually an hour, a little bit over sometimes, we are hoping that people, and myself included, will have a better understanding as to what it means, how it affects us, and how we can move on regardless of what category we may be in, so to speak. So, why not take a minute or so, introduce yourself a little bit, let people know who you are, and then I will get right into the specifics with the questions.
Sure. Well, I am Dr. Visham Bhimull, a primary care physician by profession,
Mhm.
but I also do a lot of cultural work. Caribbean Hindustani started as a result of my trying to record the Caribbean Hindustani language, or the language that the indentured laborers would have spoken, as well as their descendants. So a lot of information I'll give you would be based on those interviews. There are old people who still speak Trinidad Bhojpuri as well as Guyanese Bhojpuri, and
Mhm.
I would have done interviews in Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad. So that it's very important to hear from this group because as you would know, the Indo-Caribbean identity is quite unique. It's
Absolutely.
something separate and apart from India itself, and that will kind of set the stage for what we're going to discuss today.
Awesome. So let's get right into it so that way we can maximize your time.
Sure.
So, my very first question for you is, can you tell me or us what do you know about the caste system as defined by a scripture itself? And for
Right.
those of you who are watching, feel free to comment as Dr.
Sure.
Visham is responding as
Right.
well.
Now, stratification of society is not unique to Hinduism itself. Hinduism, we must understand, is well, I mean, we might see it as a denomination of religion now, but if you look in, let's say, ancient civilization, it was actually more than that. It was a civilization. Um, the books of the Hindus, or at least the first written texts, which actually are the first prose in what we call the Indo-European languages. English is also one of those. Um, it alludes to that stratification of society. I want to make reference to the Purusha Sukta,
Mhm.
which is the divine human being or form as we see ourselves, and it it spoke of the body of the Purusha. Purusha is a different name for what we might, Vaishnavites or those who worship Vishnu call it Vishnu, but it is, the Purusha essentially is what we project as humans, an understanding of our entire body itself as reflected into the universe, where it emphasizes the fact of the macrocosm, which are us, essentially is in the microcosm is in the macrocosm. In one of the lines, it says, the Purusha Sukta talks about basically a pyre of burden of a body, and it talks about the head of the Purusha or the divine human being becoming the Brahmans, the torso becoming the Vaishya, the feet and the foot becoming divides it into the four, which is the head Kshatri, torso, no, the head is the Brahmin, torso Kshatri, the legs are the Vaishya, and the feet are the Shudra, right? Vedas talk about these four. These are broad classifications because you could subdivide in each.
For sure.
Only recently, the Dalit, or the lower portion, a fifth one, was added. I will explore that as we go into it more. But that is one scriptural reference, and it's echoed in the Veda itself.
All right. So people are responding and so on. There's one person saying that they don't like that caste system. And we'll get into all of that by the end of the program.
Very excited to answer that question.
Right. So so please feel free to kind of give your opinion here. We, our show, as you know, it's an open chit chat. There's no judgmental going on here and all of that. But it's nice to have a good understanding, especially somebody who took the time to kind of learn the inside scoop of it. Because usually when we, scan through things, or when we're doing a little bit of research for the sake of a paper and so on, we don't necessarily go in depth and so on. So thank you for taking our challenge to join us, Dr. Visham. Very much appreciated. So I'm assuming you're ready for my next question then, right?
Not a question, comment, right? We'll do that afterwards, okay?
No, questions, not comment. We're not worrying, but I'm continuing with a question I have in plan or in store for you.
Sure.
Good, awesome. So the next question that I have here for you, just so that we have a good understanding, is that how is it that the caste system pragmatic in our society today? Because we live in a different kind of society.
Right. I just want to bring that within the context. You see, the misnomer, the misinformation that the caste system is something unique to Hinduism, but that's not so. We spoke about Indo-European languages. This classify Indo-European civilizations. The Vedic civilization is only one of those. You have also the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Celts, and the Slavs, which would be those who speak Russian languages. And now we all worship similar divinities, and our languages came from one common source, which we call it Proto-Indo-European. Scholars who look at these actually talk about these civilizations, the Vedic being one example of dividing society into a priestly caste, into a business class, and into a laborer class. So Hinduism is not the only one. Yes, we might talk, these are called Indo-European civilizations, right? Even if you look at a religious comparison of these, you could see we initially worship the same divinities, which are phenomena of nature. So I just want to give examples of names because you said pragmatic, right? Sure. And you would see how it would fit in society. So sonar is a Hindi word. Sonar. We have sonar, the jeweler in Trinidad. I assume it would be the same in Guyana and different parts of the diaspora. Sonar comes from sona, means gold. Sonar is a goldsmith, right? The other example, loha is iron, a lohar is a blacksmith. Cham is leather, a chamar is a cobbler, right? So, and well, if we go up to Brahmin now, as priest, kshatri, the word kshetra comes from that, means the one who is dominion over the land, or the king. So as you would see, these are different roles in society. You must understand that these roles existed not only in Hinduism, it existed in medieval England, it existed in Europe, it existed in every single civilization had such a stratification. The important thing to remember, and pragmatically it applies today, because it said that, and I don't like how authors represent it, because they always represent it as unique to Hinduism. When you cross the Kalapani, well, caste wasn't the issue anymore. I want to bear reference to two words here. These two words are Varana and Jati. Apan Jat, I think I saw an article written from Guyana some time ago. Varana literally means character. It could be used for color as well. We must appreciate a Varana or character of a person determines what they are set out to do in life, whether they are taught to do it or whether genetically they would have inclination towards it. Both add to it. Your birth and genetics you are given, as well as your ability to learn and pick up and then do that trade. Pragmatically, again, when there were no institutions of learning to teach these so-called trades or professions, the family was the institution of learning. So if a sonar son was born in a sonar's house, there were no institutions of learning, the family would be on a daily basis together, then his son by automatically would pick up the trade of his father. We see that in the Gharana system, or at least our local classical singers, you call it tan singing and they call it Baitak Ghana. In Suriname, who are the current local classical singers? The children or the grandchildren of the famous ones, let's say about 50 decades before. So that's just an example how it applies now. What I want to also say is that we mentioned that all societies are divided into the strata because I gave English names for them and people can identify that. But what I want to make also clear is that whatever is a stratification system of society of the past may not necessarily apply in the future because we have institutions of learning. I want to go back to the scriptural reference again. There are 3 stories I remember as a child because my nana used to tell us stories from Mahabharata and Ramayana and so. King Bharata, who was the Mahabharata is named after, he did not choose his offspring to rule the kingdom after. He chose someone who he thought had the correct Varana, the term we used before. When Lord Ram went to Shabari, and Shabari said, no, I'm a lower caste than you, you're not supposed to touch me. He told her to taste the fruit, and then once it is good, she could feed it to him. There's a similar story of Krishna where there was a lady who sells fruits, I believe. She wanted to see Lord Krishna, and she would go and try to sell fruits in front of the house, hoping to see him. And one day she saw him and he came up and she says, all I want you to do is call me mother. He said, I'll do better than that. I'll sit on your lap as if you were my mother. Again, a lower caste, Lord Krishna being a different caste, a Kshatri caste, where she was a merchant caste. So these are 3 distinct examples I have seen in scripture where it wasn't about caste per se. In other words, one wonders what stories would have been derived after the Mughal invasion in India, as well as the colonials. At present, within the diaspora, that caste bears no relevance anymore. Again, because of institutions of learning, and again, because, in other words, our roles in society have changed in a modern civilization.
All right. Thank you, by the way, for taking up that challenge to answer that question there. So my next question for you is, what can you add about the indentureship and the caste system?
All right. So in indentureship, it was very interesting. Now, as a child, I remember remnants of the caste system existed with conversations with my grandparents. But we moved to the other word now, Jati. So we had Varan, now we do Jati. Jati initially would have meant the group of people that, well, my grandmother is a nation, right? Mm-hmm. But I'll explain to you how it came to be nation in our diasporic context. But it means the group of people who are Sonar is a Jati. The group of people who are Lohar is a Jati. But when we came across, or the indentured laborers came across the Kalapani, you would find that a segregated community in a new space would find strength in shouldering on each other. So apart from caste, even religion was something that didn't matter anymore. Mm-hmm. We all are from India, we all Hindustani, right? Example here in Trinidad is that Husay, which is Muharram, a Muslim festival, is celebrated by Muslims and Hindus. It was an identifier to say that, well, we are Hindustani, we are from India. Muluk Des is the word I hear in my interviews. So So when we come back to caste as well, that in itself would have changed over time because it was something that divides us, makes us weaker as a marginalized group. Now, within our society, even present day, Jati has come to mean Hindustani. In other words, that is who we are, that is our identity. We are this community, we are this group, and that's how it came to mean nation or community, right? So that I think would explain within the context of indentureship. And then again, because of moving up in a Western system of education, whatever you were prepared for, your skill would no longer be akin to what was of the past. So that is where now I would emphasize its present day, modern day irrelevance.
All right. So I think my next question for you will probably answer some of the comments that I'm seeing from what people are saying right now. And so let me make sure I get it right here because people are asking a really good question. And so my next question for you, would you say that that this whole caste system, do you think it's fair or are there unfairness in the whole system?
Right, and I wouldn't identify the caste system because remember earlier I identified that such a stratification exists in all societies. What you tend to find in any civilization, the Indian civilization, pertaining to Vedic civilization, is no exception, is that, and I explained it before, what was the stratification of the past now changes in a modern context based on how we have modernized, based on technology, based on the current knowledge. But what you would find is those who would have, because eventually it comes by birth. Remember we mentioned that if you look at the aristocrats in society, the US no exception, the same aristocrats and their children inherit what is political power. India is no example. Actually, no country is an exception to this. So that we can ask ourselves then, are the offspring capable of carrying on? May not be the case, right? They would have probably been brought up in the house of a politician, somebody who was in charge, which was akin to the Kshatri prior. But as we would see from all examples all over the world, they may not necessarily match up to what that role is. However, they inherit the power. Again, we come back to the caste system. So yes, over time, in all civilizations, when you have an aristocracy, or anything that is inherited, the discrimination comes to play. And that, the Hindu civilization, Vedic civilization, is no exception to that rule. I have a problem when people identify and use and vilify Hinduism when it is even worse in other civilizations, each circumstance being unique.
All right. So keep in mind, we live in a modernized world now. Things have changed and all of that, right? We don't necessarily do things the way we used to do 100 years ago and so on. Right. So what would you say are the relevance when it comes to the caste system in this modernized world?
I always say something like the religion is the politics of the past. The political heroes of the past become gods. Over and over, we have something called Marxism. Marxism is where the proletariat now asks for justice from the bourgeois. That again is how a caste system, any caste system, now changes to be irrelevant. When those on the lower rung or those who are not in control would band together. We see this in Trinidad happening last week or before when there were the riots. In other words, the proletariat or those on the lower rung of the ladder of society. When they come together and, in a sense, ask for change, the French Revolution being no exception, as well as other revolutions, again, that system has to change. Because remember, we have a modern system now that it has its own roles, its own functions. For instance, we never had IT in the past. Now people have to fulfill that role. So with the Industrial Revolution as well, blacksmiths, artisans, and all these weavers and all these people didn't find a role again. I'm not saying that it might not return because again, human society evolves in such a way for a utilitarian perspective where everybody would benefit. But again, it has to do with that whole concept of reinvention of a wheel with regard to the stratification of society, which will always exist.
All right. Thank you, by the way, for taking the time to respond to that question. I want to remind people that they're listening to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat, and there are a few different ways to listen to us. You can listen to us on the regular dial, that's the radio. You can listen to us on TV as well, for those of you who have the Rogers digital box on channel 946. And of course, we are live streamers Chit Chat here, so do take the opportunity to share our page. Joining us tonight is Dr. Visham Bhimull. We have invited him to really, shed some light when it comes to the caste system and so on, because I mean, things have changed. We're doing things differently. Now compared to with many years ago, and so having a little bit of a better knowledge is never a bad thing. And I mean, this is a topic that we don't always talk about, we don't always hear and all of that, and so that's one of the reasons why we took the privilege to actually have these kinds of chit chat on this show here. So my next question for you is somewhat similar to the previous one, but it's a little bit more specific. So how is it relevant, particularly to our Indo-Caribbean culture, so to speak?
Sure. Okay, so one thing I do on Caribbean Insiders is we translate songs, folk songs, folk traditions, expressions. Even though a caste system is not relevant in a present day, I mean, I can give example for Trinidad and Tobago. Before in the earlier times, let's say about 50 to 100 years prior, you'd have arranged marriages again according to caste. It existed in Trinidad. I assume the same in Guyana and Suriname, but that's no longer so, right? But in our expressions and words we might use, even in religious context, because I just quoted Veda, right? It's still existent. There is now a divide because, okay, a young person, a person probably in their 20s or younger, wouldn't really understand the relevance of the caste system because it doesn't really apply in today's society. So there's a disjoint now between our cultural expressions and what existed in the past and the understanding of our use. That emphasizes the point. Now, even though we might read the Vedic text and unfortunately try to apply it to the present day, which doesn't make sense, because if you had a civilization eons in the past, what that civilization understood by a particular concept may not necessarily be what we understand now. That's one point. What is emphasized, and because this discussion started with scripture, is it emphasizes a reinterpretation to a modern context of what would have existed in the past. That as far as I see, that is what is lacking. And the answer to the previous question is that remnants of what is the caste system would be in our cultural expression.
All right. So my next question for you here is, so let's say somebody, born in a Brahmin family, so to speak, like a high-class family, and let's say they're not living the life of a Brahmin, so to speak, right? They're living, anyhow kind of life, not following, things accordingly. They're meat eaters, they do all kinds of things that they shouldn't be doing, so to speak, kind of thing. Does that mean that they're losing that status of that high class, or Brahmin status, or you just don't lose it, you are it, regardless what?
From my own personal experience, at the end of it, not all Brahmins are Pandits. From my Trinidad experience, because you use that specific class. I mean, if we look at a blacksmith, goldsmiths still do exist because goldsmiths still find a profession in that. But a blacksmith or other professions may not necessarily, so they're basically irrelevant. Pandits are needed in a Hindu society because we still do pujas, yagyas, and all these things. But if you look at those who claim to come from maybe a Brahmin lineage, many of them have been diluted, for want of a better word, into normal societal practice. In Trinidad here, I'm not sure for anywhere else, there are certain things that are seen as, drinking alcohol, possibly eating meat, living a particular quote-unquote party lifestyle. I don't know how you call it in Ghana or Suriname, but we have carnival here, right? I must add to this that the Indo-Trinidadian community, they are one of the major contributors to what is carnival, irrespective of caste, high or low. So within the traditional world, yes. Remember we spoke of younger versus now we look at older people. Within the eyes of older people, yes, they are seen to be, what's the word? They would look down on them for being Brahmin and partaking of becoming involved in mainstream culture. But a young person, I think, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What has taken place is that Indo-Trinidadians, irrespective of caste, which nobody remembers anymore, except for those that they hire wrong, because there's this concept of, well, a pundit's son becoming a pundit. Mind you, but that is slowly changing over time, because those who take on the role of a preacher may not necessarily be Brahmin in this day and age. The other point I want to bring back is, and this is something that's not emphasized, Buddhism and Jainism are what? They are offshoots of Hinduism, right? But people don't realize that it was because of revolution that happened. Any new religion that we started, I mean Sikhism, Buddha was a Kshatriya caste. Mahavir, who started Jainism, was a Kshatriya, but they assumed roles of Brahmins. And for that, because of how society was back then, that is how you had offshoots of those who followed Buddha and those who followed Mahavir, right? I would want to emphasize such insistence on caste as roles in modern society doesn't exist anymore, at least in Trinidad.
So I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. So apart from how people view somebody else, apart from how us may view Brahmin or all of that, because people judge people all the time anyway. So apart from how people might view a Brahmin kind of thing, can they actually lose that status of being a Brahmin? So let me ask that question again. So somebody born in a Brahmin family and they're considered Brahmin, they're considered higher class. My question is, can they lose that status? Is it a yes or no answer?
Right. There's no rule that determines that. I'll give you two perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
One is that, well, you no longer fulfill that role, so you may not be seen as that. Mm-hmm. Two is that I have seen people who would have been imbibed in society and came back to fulfill the role of a priest. So both streams are possible that I know based on research.
So that was going to be my next question. So in other words, somebody can be, if I understand you correctly, somebody can born in, let's say, a lower class. I'm just speaking in simple language here because I have a variety of different people watching, listening. Sure. So somebody can probably born in a lower class, let's say, and then they can develop and work their way up to a higher class then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I know of examples where people, not necessarily Brahmins, but fulfill the role of priests.
Yeah, so but the fact about the priesthood thing, I'm just talking about in the Brahmin level
in general,
of that speak in general.
Just Brahmin, or you want me to use a separate example?
I mean, like, because when I talk about Brahmin, I'm more referring to like a higher class, right? Because Brahmin are concerned themselves to be a higher class.
I want to give you quick examples from India. So I remember the High Commissioner of India here brought artisans, like we mentioned, sonar, lohar, right, and chamars, and they had them in a booth. The booth there, and I was very interested because it was the first time I was introduced to people from India who belonged to that caste. Mm-hmm. Of the 5 or 6, 2 were not born into that caste, and they just learned how to do the profession, and they became as functional in that profession. That's an example from India. Mm-hmm. I would say the same thing happens in Trinidad. I mean, okay, so Kshatriya is no longer a caste unless you count a politician, that which would be equivalent now, right? Because he's the one in charge. But again, from that concept, now we see, because remember in Indian society, even those who might fulfill the role of a politician would have been of a particular caste. Now we look at it in modern society, those who have the reins of power, they're not necessarily Kshatri. So, I mean, that's another example of how people's Varana now fits their role in society, that a caste system of the past no longer applies.
No, yeah, and thank you for responding to that. And I totally get you. And so for me personally, and this is you know, me responding to people here as well too. We all have our own different opinion. And I know you have a passion for this for these kinds of things. That's one of the reasons you're here. That's one of the reasons you continue to study to have more knowledge. And it's so nice of you to actually share your knowledge with us. There's no question about that. You know, but for me, if I was to kind of respond to some of the comments people are making, I personally, I'm, you know, I don't believe in the caste system really. Let me explain this so people who are watching, you know, don't misunderstand me. I believe that if you're born, okay, let me put it this way, you know, somebody can born in a rich family and they have everything, you know, that they need and this richness and they don't have to work and everything is just there. But let's say for some reason, you know, they are not able to, you know, maintain things accordingly. And let's say they get rid of everything and they sport it out and they spend it out and all of that, and they have nothing left, they wouldn't necessarily be a rich person anymore. And so what that means is that, kind of like what you said in a different way too, that you can lose that status if you're not follow along and you're not living your life accordingly, kind of thing. Like, am I
I
right?
want to add what you add an essential point.
Yeah.
Wealth also determines that classification. You made it clear then. And at the end of the day, wealth is very, very integral to a caste system of any society. So you're very right. In other words, if you don't possess that wherewithal anymore, then you may not necessarily fulfill that role in society in that particular position. But we also have to look at ancient India. Ancient India, and we spoke about it, Hinduism not being a religion, because there were law books, there were medicine books, Ayurveda, law books, and the public health books, which were the Manusmriti, right? They would have applied and dictated in society. Again, I gave examples from scripture itself, where even those rules did not apply, as written in scripture. So again, I mean, yes, at this point, I could say, for me personally as well, I don't necessarily believe in a caste system applying anymore, but we can't deny it did apply in the past.
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. I have to agree with you on that one. Of course, it did apply in the past. Things are changing, things are evolving, and so on. And so this, and Christine brought up a good point. This caste system, it's dividing people here because we are kind of saying, you know, to somebody else that, okay, well, we are better than you, or vice versa. I remember this situation back in Guyana, which is pretty sad. This is like a good while ago. Because some people still believe in that caste system really very much, right? And I remembered at the Hindu mandir, there was one fella. He's dead now, though he's not. But he was saying that he would rather take a Brahmin, whatever Brahmin means to him in his mind. I'm assuming he meant that you're born a Brahmin and whatnot. He would rather take a Brahmin to do his puja. Doesn't matter if he bring him out of the rum shop. Those were his words. And then I said to myself that it goes to show that people, some people are really deep into it and kind of really not understanding. So even though somebody might live let's say a pure, decent life, you know, and all of that, you know, whatever decent is these days, anyways, he would rather to bypass that person, as I understand it, and go and bring this other person who consider himself a Brahmin to do the puja.
I mean, born into a Brahmin, so by you be a Brahmin until death.
Right. Sorry.
Right. What I want to mention about that is that again, that emphasizes holding on to power.
It sounds like what's happening in Guyana right now, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
I know. I totally hear you. You know, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, but the whole point about this again, and then, and in any society, I mean, we talk about the higher caste, and we mentioned Brahmin, but higher caste is always means the aristocracy, or those who are in charge, those who set the status quo, those who have the political power. I mean, again, we describe in a modern society. So, in any society, that is, which we mentioned before, those who were in power historically may have inherited it, may not be the best persons to be there at this point in time, but will fight tooth and nail to hold on to that power they inherited.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, as human beings, people do that all the time. I think we all do it in different ways. There's no question about that. So, like, I'm not trying to say like I'm totally innocent when it comes to that. I think we're probably doing it in ways that we're not even realizing it, kind of thing, right?
But what I want to mention though is that that's the thing. We don't step out the box and look at the comparisons with society, and we don't realize this is the normal evolution of man and thought.
Absolutely. 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 So let me take a minute now to kind of see what people are saying.
Sure.
and acknowledge a few people. Kind of thing. You brought up some good point here, and it's we've never had these kinds of chit chat on our show here, but it's always nice to know, and especially the people giving their perspective and things of that kind. So Christine, I definitely Christine is saying that even if you lose all your wealth, people don't have to know, of course, right? so people can still pretend. And you know what, Christine, the reality is though, is that we have many of those people, because a lot of people, even though they don't have anything, and they're probably so, so broken in so many different ways, whether that be, physical wealth or whatever wealth that is, but they're still showcasing themselves as if they have it all, So I totally hear you. So people are doing it really, really they're doing it well for sure, But that comes back to what Dr. Visham said, that people still want to hold on to that power. It's a power thing, no question about it. And it's exactly what's happening in Guyana right now. For example, I'm not sure how much you're following the Guyana election, but I don't think people mind me speak about this a little bit, because it's all related here, because we're talking about power control and you were the one who brought it up. And so right now we have the government who's in power right now, they don't want to leave, and they've lost the election, clearly lost the election, and they don't want to lose that status, kind of thing, right? Because they want to hold on to that power. So kind of exactly what you say, people don't want.
That's a metaphor. Clearly you have lost. So if you would have done that, then you don't hold the reins of power anymore,
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. So let me acknowledge one or two people here, and then I have one or two more not question related to this. I think you've given us enough, and I know this is a topic where we can keep talking and talking in stuff details. I kind of get that, but we're going to be a little bit more loose now, just to kind of get to know you a little bit more. But let me take the time to acknowledge a few people here. So let me acknowledge Shaira. Thank you so much for taking a sneak peek here. We hope that you've learned something from what Dr. Visham just said. This is him sharing his knowledge with us, so you can make the most out of it. That's what it's all about. So he's not saying that you will have to follow this along. He's just sharing how it used to be in the past, and he's also sharing how things have changed over the years, and things are more loosened up now, so to speak. That's the best way for me to kind of put it. Ramrati, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking a sneak peek. Hamesh, thank you so much for taking a sneak peek. We are going to have you on the show here as well too soon. Krishnan, Rebecca, we're going to have you on here as well too. Very nice. Savitri, thank you so much. Jason, Satish, Nanda, and all of you guys, and especially for those of you who are sharing our page and all that, we definitely appreciate that, and so on. Yes. So I was just reading and scanning through a few things there. So, I mean, you're very much passionate about this. So are you in Trinidad right now, or are you elsewhere?
No, I'm in Trinidad.
Oh, you are in Trinidad right now. Okay. And so when you're not doing all of this, I know you are a family a physician, you you do some medical work and so on. So when you're not doing your medical work and so on, I'm assuming you're because you do a lot of cultural piece, but a lot of research and a lot of in-depth stuff you're doing, kind of thing. So good for you, because not too many people do that line of work. So what gets you really motivated or wanting to kind of dig so deep, really, to really
I mean, yeah, I guess you're not the first person to ask that question. And then unconsciously for myself do it, and I had to find an answer. But okay, people from my generation or cohort may not necessarily have how I was brought up. From age, when I was born till I was 17, I grew up with my grandparents, maternal grandparents, Nana, Nani. What I experienced there was Bhojpuri spoken on a daily basis. Things like rural life, gobar lipe, fireside, cows, a Adori. I don't know if anybody know that what that word means.
Oh yes, yes, yes,
It's
absolutely. It still happens, you know.
basically
It still happens. Yeah, just so you know, the dowry.
well, adori, yeah, which is the urdi. You make a paste with it and you dry it. So basically, it was that. And then after the age of 70, my grandmother died. So we didn't really interact with our grandparents anymore after that. Um, I remember once asking my mom, um, why it is we don't speak Hindustani. I mean, we look Indian, we look at Indian movies, but we can't understand the language. I mean, and that is. I mean, we spoke about inheriting a caste or a jati or whatever, but some things like language is important. Is important for our identity.
Okay.
Um, so after that, I learned Hindi at university, and I want to mention Dr. Peggy Mohan here. She did Trinidad Bhojpuri morphological study. Dr. Gambhir, who is Indian, but he did Guyanese Bhojpuri, and then Moti Marhi, who did Sarnami. So I have all their work, and I learned to speak the Caribbean Hindustani language, specifically Trinidad Bhojpuri from that. So I do interviews with all people in Trinidad, over 80, who still speak that language. I have about 20 hours of recording, as well as in Suriname and Guyana, and also listening to the music and the songs of Chutney, try to translate them because people sing them and they don't know chutney and local classical don't know the meanings. That is why I did so much research. Maybe it was to capture the language, capture my identity, but things like this, even discussing the caste system, I would have encountered as part of the research in the interviews, as well as stuff I would have read. One of my friends, his name is Richard Rampasad, he's a counselor in Trinidad. I think it's St. Augustine or Tunapuna. He did research on the Kohar, which is a caste of potter. What was very interesting about that is that in Trinidad and Tobago, the only potters people know in mainstream education are the Amerindians. But people neglect to recognize that those in the East Indian community as a caste or profession came as potters as well. So again, these are things I think that there's a vacuum with regard to telling the world that we are Indo-Caribbean and this is how we have contributed to the Caribbean, which is not represented, I think, in mainstream education, even in the Caribbean.
So let's say you are meeting somebody for the first time and you realize that they're not like a Brahmin person, like I'm saying, like, you know, in terms of born a Brahmin, and you don't know anything about a person. Do you have any kind of bias in you where you're thinking, oh, well, he or she is not, has that ever come across your mind?
No, okay, so I'm gonna answer that question. Okay, so I'll tell you what I know about my caste based on stories that I would have heard from my grandparents.
Of course.
My mom supposedly comes from a Brahmin home. I learned to read and write Hindi from my mamu, as my mommy's older brother. We used to call him Pandit Mamu because he was a Pandit. And Dad's family was Ahir. And I confirm that because Dad's uncle used to sing the Biraha songs, which were Ahir songs. So that's one perspective. I speak Trinidad Bhojpuri and I speak Hindi, as well as other languages. We wouldn't go into that. But I think as a Pandit, you should know the Hindi or Hindustani language because your pravachan, what you give to the Hindi population, is in that language, even Sanskrit. My personal experience to that is that I would speak Hindi to Pandits, but they can't respond. So at the end of the day, we need to understand, and this is not only in that caste, but even the singers, the local classical singers, and those who carry on that tradition as performers, they speak not a word of the language, but they still perform. Because I understand the language, I listen on the radio, the Hindustani stations, and when I listen, because I speak language, I know when they mispronounce words. Remember, we as a Caribbean people representing Indian culture are not only for ourselves, but the rest of the world. I think not only Brahmins, but any aspect of any sort of profession that emulates what is Indo-Caribbean, the person owes it to themselves to be, I'm a doctor. I would have written an exam, an accredited exam, to practice as a doctor legally. I think it applies to even professions in the Indo-Caribbean community, where it comes to our culture. And that is my position, specifically on that. Not only not identifying any specific caste, I just give you examples, but even for the rest, a sonar should be able to tell you what are the traditions that comes from his family. I mean, as a sonar, I would be proud to say something like that.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I just thought I'd ask you because I would assume that having so much knowledge when it comes to different castes and all of that, that it's not uncommon for us to kind of maybe have that kind of feeling because even now, apart from the casting itself, the way you explained it earlier,
Hmm.
it could be, it is not uncommon, by the way, for people to kind of judge people differently based on color, based on different ethnicity and all of that kind of thing, right? So that's one of the reasons I asked you that question, not to put you on the spot or anything of that kind.
But I mean, I gave an honest answer from my perspective too,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day,
Mhm.
I think that the Indo-Caribbean people feel themselves are not like what I did with Caribbean Hindustani.
Mhm.
Research, documentation, this is what it was, this is what it is, and so we can have a meaningful conversation. I think and not only the Indo-Caribbean community, I think from speaking as a Trinidadian, I think that honestly, we are only proud to be Trinidadians or Indo-Trinidadians only in certain perspectives. If we go abroad and we have to shoulder on other Trinidadians and form a community, to say, yes, we're Trinidadian. For Carnival, we Trinidadian then. But for all intents and purposes, for the rest of the year, when there are no festivals that emulate what is Trinidadianness or Trinbagonianness, we are American because we look at that media and we emulate that, and it dictates who we are even at a subconscious level. That's something we need to address, and I want to again uh, basically speak out or bring the attention of the Indo-Caribbean community to this fact, because we are responsible for our identity as Indo-Caribbean people, and we should be the ones getting the information so that it's out there for people to appreciate that.
I totally hear what you're saying, but keep in mind, I totally get you, eh? Like I totally 100% get you. Like there's no question about that. But the world has changed, and that's one of the reasons the world has changed in a really big way, right? I'm not sure, the world is, and it's continuing to change. Keep in
Right.
mind when people are born in, in these days in our culture, you don't find people name themselves Ram and Sita and stuff anymore. It's always Jim
I'm pretty
Jones and all of those types of thing, right? And so and so people are getting away from it, even from a different person. Yeah, even that, because, and I think people have all right to do that too, but because I've seen it all the time. And again, I want to make sure I think when I speak here, and I'm not, if people have, at the end of the day, me working in the social work
I,
profession, I always leave it up to the client, let them make that decision. I show them, different perspective, and let them make that choice. But based
right.
on what you have said there, you put it back on the people kind of thing, right? But even simple things like the name thing, people are ashamed actually to call themselves
Why?
Sookram,
But
for
then
example, right?
why is that? It means again you associate your identity as something inferior. And again, I didn't only put it on the Indo-Caribbean community. Let's look at the Black Lives Matter
Black
movement.
Lives Matter, yeah.
Right. It has influenced everyone in the world, even Trinidad up to last week with the riots when the three men died. But what media pushed that? I remember posting something today where the current minister, we're going to elections in the next month, the current minister of finance said this on national TV. He said, I raised the price of gas by 15%. I raised it again. They didn't write. So that means I will raise it again in the next budget. I mean, that is not something that to cause an uproar. And he laughed when he did it. So one is you're looking at Western media. When Western media reacts to a discrimination issue, then you wake up. But when it occurs in your country, you're dormant. You don't seem to care. And I think that also emulates that whole issue of Trinbagonian identity and unconsciously having your mainstream and the status quo be dictated by Western media.
Yeah, you definitely brought up a good point there, I totally hear what you're saying there, but the bottom line is that it happens. People want people change their identity for different type of reasons as well too. And here, speaking of the discrimination piece, though, when it comes to places like North America, let's say, um, when it comes to the HR piece of it, generally speaking, study actually shows this. Based on name, a lot of people choose name when they're going through resumes and things of that kind. So that's one of the reasons. In many cases, people change their name, at least their first name and so
I
on.
mean, and institutional racialism comes up there because I remember there's a point where I remember looking at a documentary where they looked at two children, one who is African American and the other one who's white American. And the white American, based on the institution, one because of his name, two because of where they went to the same school, two because of the community he lived in, and so on. Certain demographic factors actually help us out because of that institutional discrimination.
Yeah, so Christine, yeah, thank you for that. So Christine is right. I actually did it for both of my girls. Or Christine says that people don't open book anymore. Usually when a child is born, people go to the pundit and kind of choose a name based on the date and time when the child was born. Exactly. Exactly. I have a recommendation there. You are right, Christine. People don't do it because sometimes it doesn't fall on the right kind of path that they want actually, and so sometimes people ignore all of that, and sometimes people don't understand it as well too, and so on, and it happens all the time, kind of thing, for sure.
But I still know it's still unconscious in our tradition way, because even if they choose an English name, they actually, some of them still look at that whole astrology as well.
So yep, and so I'm just reading one or two comment here. So Rajan is saying that in Suriname, Hindustani people mostly use Hindustani names and use it. Yeah, okay. And he's also saying that the caste system still apply here under certain circumstances. Okay, yeah. So for sure, we kind of get that. I know. I mean, and it's so true. It's still it's some people still follow it, and we're not saying that it's right and wrong kind of thing. My main thing about it though, like my main concern about it, let's say based on karma, I'm just saying something now, let's say based on karma, right? Somebody come as a Brahmin because they're reaping what they've sowed in the last birth and so on. That's a whole different discussion. So let's say that I still think that I think that's okay to kind of enjoy it too, and enjoy that privilege, in my opinion. But I think as human being, really, like we should never, put anybody down, whether or not if they're same as us or lower than us and so on. Because when you get deep into religion too, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, God come in all different form too, So sometimes we can be looked down upon somebody and all of that, just because we were put to a test and all of that too, kind of thing, right? But apart from any sort of spiritual belief and religion and so on, in my profession as a social worker, I see value in every single person, right? That's what I train my brain to do. So it doesn't matter what they have done in their life. It doesn't matter how many times they've went to jail. It doesn't matter what they have done. I have that skill to still see value in them, and I always pull it out. And it is a practice I always kind of continue on, kind of thing. And so, this conversation is such of an interesting one. I'm glad that you took the time actually to kind of join us, to kind of shed some light, for sure. I'm not sure what people make out of it, but for me, things are changing now, and then people have to adjust accordingly as well too. Not that you are kind of forsaking any sort of values that were given to us, kind of thing, right? For some people, if it makes sense to them, they kind of continue on, and some people will do it with pride. There's no question about that, because of course, if people are there, a person like yourself, for example, if you are a Brahmin, kind of thing, it's not something to kind of to be disappointed about. It's something to be proud of, actually, but it should be something where people maintain it in a sense that you're living the life of a Brahmin, whatever that may look like, if you know what I mean. That's my take on all of what you've said.
Right, but what I want to also say is that we could probably have a different interview. Remember I said religion is the politics of the past. Hinduism is not the only example of that. We can identify it in scripture. And what we are talking about have its basis in scripture. Right? And that's why people hold on to it as well, the will of God, to put it in a better way. But we also have to look at religion for what it is, based on how politics played out in the past. I could mention other things here regarding even the perspective you spoke about reincarnation, reincarnation as it was seen in Vedic times versus Mahabharata and Ramayana versus the Bhakti movement. The perspective evolved over time of how we understand it. The same way Jesus Christ being the sacrificial lamb was not always the main concept after Jesus died. So even that, we have to understand, well, why does religion reason things in such a way that may not make sense to us? But if we look at the history of how things progress over time, then it could make more sense. And then we could probably take that and now apply it to a modern time in a relevant way.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you put that in a very nice way there. And so I have to respond to Christine, though, because I work in employment. And Christine, what Christine is saying that on your resume, your name can be an advantage for diversity, and fitting the quota. What she's saying is there is that having an ethnic name can be an advantage as well, too. And that is very much true, Christine, because, for example, here in Canada, it is mandatory for any organization to have a percentage of underprivileged people or visible minority and all of that, people of color and so on. And I've been very lucky that way too. And this is an advantage for me that way, because sometimes a certain company organization, they're looking for that fit kind of thing, right? And so sometimes I fit in really, really well as well too. So absolutely, I like the way you think there. Yeah. So Dr. Visham, as you know, the time goes by really fast. We've been chit-chatting for an hour here. I know a person like you have lots to share. There's no question about that. It was so nice that you took the time to join us, because I mean, these are the kind of things, kind of conversation we want to have, of course, because not too often we have them. And so this version of our chit chat is a very special one. It will always be there. People watch it. People, people will learn something from it for sure. There's no question about that. It's a very dry topic. I know it's not too sexy kind of thing. A lot of people like their entertainment and their chutney and all of that kind of thing. There's no question about. And speaking of chutney, though, let me mention it. Speaking of chutney, we have tomorrow Ram Rajiv Prabhu from Trinidad, by the way, is joining us tomorrow. So we'll have some chutney for you tomorrow. So you want to join us for that as well too. So this one is very unique because we need to continue to stay on top of things. And although we are not the ones kind of really go in depth and so on, but person like you who are doing some extra research, at least you're sharing it with us. But many people are doing the basic stuff, because, for example, we went with traditional names for children and things of that kind, because we don't want everything to fade away kind of thing. Living in a place like North America, there's always, you have to find that balance. And the good thing with places like Canada, though, I'm speaking about Canada itself, they are very welcoming, of people from many parts of the world. We are so diverse. We're probably one of the most diverse countries in the world. So everybody will practice their culture here openly. Like when I do my cultural show here in Canada, I have not only the West Indian people coming to my event, I have, white people, I have people from different culture coming and enjoy it. And that's one of the reasons why we do it in the first place. We do it with pride, and we want to showcase what we have, that kind of way, things like that. So we're not drifting away and modernize it in terms of make it more westernized or anything of that kind. We're doing it the actual traditional way kind of thing, and stuff of that kind. So I just thought I mentioned that. I'm giving you the opportunity, though, to say any last thing you would like to say. Maybe something you wanted to say, you haven't had the opportunity. Now is a good time to say it.
I think I'm a good interviewer. I know how to squeeze in things. I even spoke about the language thing earlier. But I just want to reiterate, I mean, if your audience did like the conversation, a lot of what I would have said would be represented on CaribbeanHindustani.org, as well as Caribbean Hindustani Facebook page. You could also go to YouTube as well. A lot of the translations we've been doing, a lot of the research work, even and stuff like the caste system is up there. And they're free to follow us and engage us if they want to know anything else more about Indian culture, or even suggest what they would like to see be researched to get to know more about it, specifically to Indo-Caribbean culture.
Oh wow! So you are still continuing on. You're not done, eh? So this is what you are going to do. This is awesome. We have to.
I might probably harass if our next interview on that topic.
No, you know what? And that is totally fine, because we will need to kind of have people like you. Like I said to you, you are unique because you have like some uniqueness, in you to offer. I'm so glad that we were able to kind of find you, and of course we'll be happy to kind of have you on again. So it will not be a burden for us to have you on. It will be a privilege actually to have you on, because how often, usually only like when you go to like a religious actual function, a 3-night religious function or so on, you're going to hear these kinds of little thing, these kinds of topic, but not necessarily on a platform like this. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things we do a little bit different in our chit chat here. We kind of very open, so it's not only just the musical cultural piece, that kind of way. We really want people to gain something at the end of it all. I mean, you mentioned a little bit about the politics piece as well, doing it and so on. And so so we have a variety of different people on here, and we're going to continue to kind of do that. But ideally, at the end of it all, we want people to gain something. So if a few people pick up from what you have said, whether that be the importance of the name that we carry, whatever that may be, or the importance of respecting people regardless of what caste they are from, kind of thing, so to speak. Even that alone is a beautiful thing, right? Because we have to take all of that into consideration. Be proud as to who you are, of course, but respect other people if they're not into that high into that high bar, so to speak, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
kind of thing. All right. So my dear fellow listeners, as we're approaching the end of tonight's program, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for tuning in to Let's Chit Chat with Narine Dat. Please remember to tune in to us again tomorrow, 7 o'clock Eastern time. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have Ram Raji Prabhu, very cultural, a little bit of a spice tomorrow. So you want to join that as well too. I hope today was a fruitful one, very, very unique topic. And to the Guyanese people, congratulations. Looks like we're getting a step closer there to kind of wrap things up there. I'm referring to election here. For those of
Well,
you,
I don't know. We have election in August, so let's see if Guyana could come up with a decision before.
I hope so. I know. I hope so.
I just want to take the opportunity to say hi to Uncle Rajan
Absolutely.
from Babis. I stayed at their house. I think they did the comment on the thing and I see you from Babis as well.
Yes.
I remember.
Yeah, I'm from Berbice. I used to live, if they're still watching, right by the 63 beach.
Right.
So if you went to the
we
63
went on
beach before,
63 Beach because that's right in front of their house.
So
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah. So I used to live right by the beach entrance there. We used to have a shop. So usually like the August Monday, and and it's always used to be a very busy place, by the way, because we have like agriculture used to be a successful place. The rest house, I think it fall off. There's no rest house anymore. The post office surrounded by nursery school, primary school, high school, private school. We have done really, really well there. Unfortunately, not everybody can be successful at business and so on. So when we came here, it basically flopped, kind of thing. But it was a very successful business. So thank you, Rajan, for watching and giving your input. But we really hope that Guyana can wrap things up now. I'm not sure what else can go wrong, but as Dr. Visham was talking about holding on to power, I'm not sure what else they can hold on to right now when they lost that power, and so that power now have to be given to the right people now, based on what the people want. It's black and white. There's nothing to kind of really argue about now. And this and it is a shame. It is a shame because the Guyanese people are suffering right now. I receive tons of emails from people, people reach out to me who have kids. One lady, my heart was broken, reach out to me and say, Narine, I don't have rice to cook and things of that kind. And so when I hear these kinds of story, like it really breaks my heart. We do bits and pieces behind the scene. Whatever we do, you wouldn't see it on Facebook and so on. We do help out behind the scene and so on. But with this situation, the people who are holding on to power, they're holding on because they want that status. They don't care about the everyday people, which is not right. And so we have to make sure we get it right. Well, we get it right, but it looks like a few people cannot get it right. So it looks like you have been following along the politics a little bit too, right? And I have to agree with you. I hope that they are able to straighten out things before Trinidad, for sure. So that way, they would look more stupid, so to speak. When I say not everybody, but the whole kind of thing. Because Suriname already progressed. They kind of move on.
Yeah.
and stuff of that kind. So I'll be watching along the Trinidad politics as well too. I love politics as well because if you are in it for the right reason, a reason to help the people, you can be in a position where you can make effective change and change policies and all of those kind of things. But generally speaking, most politicians, whether that be in Guyana, Trinidad, Canada, America, generally speaking, is that power thing. It's that living, a different kind of life, because once you're a politician, really, like life can change for you, kind of thing, right? And then you get to that higher class automatically. You get well, they give themselves the highest class, whatever you want to call it, right?
Exactly.
For sure. But anyways, so again, on behalf of myself and Dr. Visham, we both would like to join together and wish you a great today and even better tomorrow. And I can assure you, your viewership, it's always a pleasure to have you on here. So again, have yourself a great night and even better tomorrow, and we'll see you again soon.